So yeah, I mean, I want to start by asking, obviously, I think most of the best sci-fi has a very human concept at its core, however big the sort of the scale is. And I think this is a good example of that. So for you, what's the sort of core of Looper? And
At the heart, yeah, well, that's all the sci-fi that I love. It does. It uses those sci-fi elements to get at human stuff. And, I mean, for me, it's kind of has to do with Emily Blunt's character in the movie. And it's about Joe, it's about kind of it's about how we kind of break out of these cycles that we're in our life. And her love for her son ends up being a big part of that. Hopefully it's kind of an emotional element that you wouldn't expect from a sci-fi film that kind of hits you at the end of it.
Yeah.
That's kind of what we're going for.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously working with Joseph again, I know you did work. Yeah, he had a small part in Brothers Bloom as well, didn't he? But how much has he like changed as an actor since Brick, and how different was he this time?
It's hard. It's funny. It's hard because we've stayed such good friends since we made Brick. It's hard for me to define what's different about him because we've both kind of been changing together over the years. But yeah, the one thing that's the same about him is he has a real purity in terms of what drives him from project to project. And whether he's making a low-budget indie movie or making a Batman movie with Chris Nolan, he's doing it for the same reason. He's doing it because it's a story that he cares about and wants to tell and people he wants to work with. And that's been the same since I met him with Brick and up until now. So it's cool to see that consistency all the way through.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And so casting, how did you work it out in terms of casting Joe and casting Bruce Willis as his older sort of version? What was the kind of order? And
well, I wrote the part for Joe just because we had stayed good friends, so I wanted to work with him again. And then when we came around to casting, that's when we cast Bruce. And I was really excited about casting Bruce Willis, but then we cast him, and I took back and I said, oh my God, what have we done? We look nothing alike. We're in a real pickle here. And so that's when we went to a very talented makeup designer, Kazu Suji, who adjusted Joe's face very subtly to look more like Bruce's. But really, at the end of the day, it's Joe's performance. Joe's doing this amazing thing where he steps into the mannerisms and the voice and kind of takes on all the stuff of Bruce. In a way that doesn't feel like an imitation, but feels like a real character. It was kind of really extraordinary to watch him do it. It's really cool.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting as well. I think it must have been pretty conscious. The two halves of the film have very distinct feels. The first is, kind of an urban dystopia, and then you have this very kind of idyllic, in some ways, farmhouse portion that's, I guess, a little slower. Yeah, so, I mean, I guess that was conscious. Talk about that sort of contrast.
It was because the whole movie is kind of setting up this moral choice at the end between those two halves that you're talking about, between kind of the city's way of doing things versus Sarah's way of doing things, between solving a problem by finding the right person and killing them versus solving a problem by raising your kid right. And so the movie presents these very different environments visually for both of those to present kind of the yin and the yang of the two fitting together. So that made sense to me. I mean, anytime you're making a big tonal shift halfway through a movie, anytime you're setting a big chunk of a sci-fi movie on a farm, you're taking a risk.
Yeah.
And all you can do is try and make it as consistently entertaining as possible. And hopefully once you step back and kind of feel the whole thing in your head, these two halves feel very cohesive. And you can see the second half seated in the first part and vice versa. And it all kind of turns back on itself, I hope.
Yeah, well, I love the contrast that it was. I think it worked
Cool,
fantastically.
cool.
Yeah.